This podcast is brought to you by Reasons to Believe. Reasons to Believe is a science-based think tank integrating modern scientific discoveries with truths of the Bible. Visit our website at reasons.org.
Welcome to Science News Flash. This is Joe Aguirre with biochemist Dr. Fazl Rana on September 28, 2009. On today's podcast, Fuzz will discuss a popular news item with the title, Four-Winged Dino May Be Missing Link in Bird Debate. Fuzz, this is a hot topic which you've addressed numerous times in the past. What's new and what can you tell us about it?
Well, Joe, this particular news item and a whole bunch of other ones that are like this were prompted by a paper published last week in Nature. So this would be, I think, the September 24th issue of the journal Nature, 2009. And it's a paper written by a team of Chinese paleontologists who are reporting on the discovery and the characterization of a very elegant fossil specimen that was recovered from a quarry in the Liaoning province of China. And this particular fossil specimen dates between about 151 and 161 million years in age, and it turns out to be a feathered dinosaur. And this idea that it has four wings, it's not some kind of bizarre creature with four wings instead of two wings. Rather, both the forelimbs and the hind limbs of this particular dinosaur appears to have had feathers on it. And so that's where they're getting the four-winged from. So they are really limbs more so than wing-like structures.
Okay, what
that you'd expect to see in theropod-type dinosaurs, which, by the way, are the dinosaurs that people are probably familiar with from Jurassic Park, the raptors, that walk around on two hind legs and are upright. They're bipedal dinosaurs. And so the arm and the leg structures, again, are not like bird wings, if you will, but rather, again, are forelimbs that have feathers associated with them and hind limbs as well.
Okay. What is this specimen called? And then tell us about this dinosaur-bird link and why there have been issues regarding it.
Sure. Well, this particular specimen, and hopefully I'm going to pronounce this right, it's Anchironus huxleyi. And the name Huxleyi is after Thomas Huxley, who was a famous biologist who was a contemporary of Charles Darwin. He was one of the premier anatomists in his day.
They call him like Darwin's bulldog or something?
Exactly, like Darwin's bulldog. And he was the first person to suggest that maybe birds had evolved from a dinosaur-like creature. And in fact, that idea has been part of paleontology for about 150 years. So that's why they named this particular specimen Huxleyi after him, is because of that association. But in recent years, this has become the leading idea to explain from evolutionary terms how how birds had evolved. And that was, again, from theropod-like dinosaurs, where the idea is that when you look at the anatomy is similar in both birds and dinosaurs, and there's also nesting behavior that you see in dinosaurs that appears to be reminiscent of the nesting behavior in birds that suggests to some people that there is this evolutionary connection. Now, of course, what's needed is more than just anatomical comparisons, but rather you also want to have the fossil record documenting that evolutionary transition. And over the last decade or so, there's been a number of incredible fossil finds from around the world, but primarily in China, in the Liaoning province of China, that show these so-called feathered dinosaurs that are bipedal, that are theropod-like dinosaurs that have been interpreted as being transitional forms, documenting this evolutionary transition. But one of the key problems with this, and this is something that we've talked about a whole lot here at Reasons to Believe over the years, is something known as the temporal paradox, is that all of these so-called transitional forms, these feathered dinosaurs, appear in the fossil record after the appearance of the first true birds, Archaeopteryx and other Archaea ornithenes, that are true birds that appear at about 150 to 155 million years ago. Up until this particular find, the oldest specimens of feathered dinosaurs dated at about 125 million years in age. So that's why this particular find is significant, because it moves the timing for these feathered dinosaurs much closer to when Archaeopteryx appeared. So the argument is that this resolves the temporal paradox.
Because the dates, again, did you say 151 to 161 million?
Right.
So there'd be some overlap with the
Exactly.
Archaeopteryx. Okay.
You know, now, and that would be my first response is that, well, first of all, is this particular paper is implying something that typically I've seen denied by evolutionary biologists. Is number one, there's a contention as to how to explain the origin of birds in evolutionary terms. This idea of this bird-dinosaur link is not an open and shut case, as it has often been portrayed. And so the fact that they're claiming that this now resolves one of the controversies indicates that there has been controversy, but we are oftentimes led to believe, if you watch National Geographic or read the magazine or read Discover or read Popular Science articles, that this is a done deal and that the evidence is so overwhelming. Well, this again is implying that there is controversy, and is implying too that the temporal paradox creates problems, because I've seen other paleontologists try to dismiss the significance of the temporal paradox. So that's kind of the first point. The second point is, I don't really think this resolves the temporal paradox, because what they're doing is they're taking the extreme range for when this particular fossil specimen existed, 161 million years. That's the uncertainty in the dating. And then they're taking the extreme range for Archaeopteryx, which again, there's uncertainty in the dating, and they're saying, look, this is appearing before Archaeopteryx. But when you actually take into account the uncertainty, these two specimens are overlapping, and so you still have the problem that the transitional forms are co-occurring with the appearance of the very first true form. And again, it doesn't dismiss the fact that the entire fossil record really shows a preponderance of these creatures at, much younger than 150 million years ago, these feathered dinosaurs. Something else that also is of significance, and this is kind of a minor point that you see in the reports on this, but I think is significant, is that scientists who were studying this specimen were not the ones who recovered it. This specimen was recovered by a farmer in the Liaoning province of China. There's another earlier specimen that has been studied that is incomplete. This is a nearly 100% complete specimen. So
of the same species?
Of the same species. That too was recovered by a farmer, but they couldn't really date it because the farmer who gave that specimen to the paleontologist wasn't quite sure where he had recovered it. This particular farmer thinks he knows where they recovered the specimen from, and so the scientists are dating based on the farmer's hearsay, or what the farmer has told them. This is not an ideal situation, because the farmer, with all of good intentions, could have simply made a mistake in terms of where this particular specimen was recovered from. The ideal situation is for the paleontologists themselves to be part of the team that has recovered the specimen, so the site can be carefully documented and the appropriate samples taken. So it very well could be that this date that they claim is actually a date that's an error, and it could be have been recovered from a different location that is of a younger age. So I don't think that this situation is resolved, and it doesn't necessarily handle other controversies surrounding the bird-dinosaur origin model.
Okay, such as?
Well, for example, this particular specimen, from an evolutionary analysis, clusters very closely to birds. And so the question is this a feathered dinosaur, or is it a flightless bird? There's an example of Caudipteryx, which a few years ago was initially declared to be a feathered dinosaur, and later, based on a more detailed characterization of the fossil remains, was concluded to be a flightless bird, not a feathered dinosaur. So we don't know if that indeed is the case in this particular instance. Another problem is there's been dispute as to whether or not these feathers on so-called feathered dinosaurs are actually feathers, or are they frayed skin, frayed integument, that gives a superficial appearance of being feathers. So that's another point of contention. Another point of contention is, are the similarities that you're seeing between the birds and dinosaurs what's called a homology, reflecting an evolutionary relationship of common ancestry, or is it what's called convergence, where because they have similar anatomical features, it's assumed that they have a common origin, but in fact those features may have arisen independently. And because birds are bipedal and because dinosaurs are bipedal, there's certain biomechanical constraints that indicate that they should have, common